And we're live. All right, welcome to the virtual LA WhipCon for 2021. Every year we normally would be gathering in LA for meet and greet and to crack whips and have a competition. But for me, at least, most importantly, I would hang out and talk with other whip makers and other whip crackers and other just enthusiasts of whips. So this year, virtually, I am hanging out with Evan Fava. Welcome, sir. Mr. EF Whips himself.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I have a lot of normal questions, but most of the point of this is, like I said, is that we don't get to see each other, right? I mean, normally we'd be at the park and we'd be hanging out and get to see each other's work, and we can try out each other's whips and so forth. So it's really good to see you. It's good to talk to another human being during this quarantine.
I'm stuck in my shop all day, every day. I haven't seen anyone about a year now.
I think that's the case for about all of us. But yeah, so let's just talk a little bit about your history and how you got into this, and then we can talk a little bit about this competition as well. So it really looks like you're a beginner with this whole braiding thing. You haven't?
Yeah, I've made like one or two, whips.
Oh, no, you do some of the most beautiful work, and so you got first place in the LA WhipCon whip making. What was it? 2 years ago.
The first year they had it, I got first place.
I mean, that's so impressive. And if anyone isn't familiar with your work and they can't squint at the stuff behind you, certainly look at your website, which has the best domain name, by the way. Yeah. Kangaroo Whips.
When I was setting up the website and I saw that was available, I grabbed it right away. I was like, you can't get anything better than
that. For everyone, when they saw that, like, why didn't I get that? Yeah, good job. But yeah, check out his website and look at some of the detailed work, and the amazing artistry is honestly what it is. It's stunning, just stunning. Beautiful work. Reminds me of makers like Peter Thorndike, to be honest. It's beautiful. But
I'm trying to beat him.
You're trying to beat him, right?
I've tried twice. Tried twice now.
Where are you competing against him at?
Clifton. It's the one he usually competes at one event, and that's in Clifton. That's usually in February. And I've sent a whip out there twice now to compete, and it got stuck in customs.
No.
Both times.
Oh.
So you get there in time. Like it was set up. I sent it out. They're like guaranteed by this date. I'm like, okay, it gives me a couple days, leeway. And it got held up in customs and didn't get there until after the competition.
Oh, and my goodness. How frustrating.
Still have a whip out there.
Wow. You just going to hold on to it for the next year? Or?
Yeah. I made it for a competition, and there has been a competition since. So.
Oh, yeah, that's right, I guess, with this. It looks like Johnny joined us. Johnny Ogren. I'm not even going to try his last name.
I can't see the comment. For some reason. So.
Oh, you can't? On mine, there's a button to show comments down at the bottom. I don't know if you have that. But he says, Evan, the only whip maker who drives a Jaguar.
Only in LA.
Only in LA.
Only in LA.
Elysium Iris says, I learned a ton from talking to Evan. So yeah, you've got a fan base. Look at that.
Oh.
That's awesome. And rightfully so.
Try to help out when I can.
Which actually leads me to one of my questions that I wanted to have this conversation for, and that is, whip making is hard to have a competition virtually, right? So they're not. The LA WhipCon's not doing a virtual whip making competition. So what is it we can do this year for that sort of camaraderie? I think this sort of conversation is good for that. We can dive into the minutia. But what do you think about that? How can we keep the community together?
It's right now. I don't even know.
Brutal honesty.
You know,
Yeah.
it's you can't because you can't have a competition because it's 50% function and 50% aesthetics. So if it looks pretty but doesn't crack well, it's not going to win. It can crack well, but if it's got really crappy drops and gaps in the body, but it cracks really well and performs well, it's not going to win. So it's you're
Yeah.
basically eliminating 50%. And I think Johnny was saying, he's like, yeah, you can take pictures of it, but you can hide that flaw.
That's true. That's
Like
true.
last year in LA, I lost by one strand, by probably a quarter of a millimeter, because there was
Really?
one strand. Uh, they had it down to me and
Blake
Blake,
Gordon, yeah.
and they were just getting nitpicky.
It's
It's, oh, well,
what I
there's
heard
this
they had to.
one little flaw here, and they're like, well, there's this one little flaw here, and they were just trying to literally find a flaw because they both cracked well. They both,
Right? Full points
well
there.
made whips, and they were just trying to find. And I just had one flaw more than
Oh,
minor flaw, and it was one strand in the thong had I either beveled it. I don't know exactly what I
did you know
did.
that going into it? It was just something that you had overlooked, or
I probably noticed it when I was plaiting it, but it was nothing that I was really
you weren't
concerned about. It was so
going to undo the whole thing to change that?
minor. It was such a minor thing. It was literally like about a quarter of a millimeter different.
A quarter of a millimeter.
Yeah, one strand. When you're talking two
Right.
millimeters strand, a quarter of a millimeter is a quarter of the strand.
Well, that's a good one.
So one strand was just a tad thinner,
Oh,
and you could see it. You could see it. 12 down. You could see it again. And it was just that one strand that
wow. Yeah, that is nitpicky.
put
But
his above mine.
yeah, from the people I've talked to from last year that I mean even Adam, that it was just so close, all of them. They all cracked so beautifully. They all were such stunning artistic, I mean, pieces of artwork, and it was
Yeah,
really, really hard. So
it's I
congratulations regardless.
from competing in Australia and here. I actually think the LA competition's harder than Australia.
Wow, really?
Just because they allow bull whips, they allow different types of whips.
Oh, that's true.
So it's not just a stock whip. In Australia, you're pretty standard. It has to be a stock whip. It has to be leather. It has to be whatever. If it's a working class, it has to be no more than 12 plat thong with no more than a 16 plat handle. If it's a working class, has to be solid color. Like very specific. Whereas there, it's has to be a certain length.
Right. Yeah.
They just
At minimum.
they,
Yeah.
they don't they don't want it to be too short or too long. They want it pretty even in terms of function.
Sure.
So
Otherwise, I think the function would be hard to judge one against the other.
yeah, because bullwhip's gonna volley different than stock whip.
That's true.
They're gonna crack differently.
But even if someone submitted a 2-foot bullwhip versus someone submitted a 12-foot bullwhip, it would still be hard to compare the two's function.
Exactly. And that's why they're
That makes sense.
It's a 12-foot. There's not as many things you can do with it. So it's
wow. And I've got several more people. Looks like we have 8 viewers. So we've got Keith Smith joined us. So welcome, Keith. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to shout it out and I'll relay it over. But Yeah, so when someone is looking at making a whip, and or even let me back it up because that's way too generic. There's so many whip makers of so many different types. When you're designing the fancy plaiting, um, do you go into it with an artistic plan? Do you say we're going to have, well, I mean, one of yours had like the different animals and different things you
Mm.
can plait into it. Do you have an inspiration to start with, or is it, this is kind of a cool design, I want to see how I can integrate this into a overall, how do you start with your planning?
Usually, it's when it comes to like the more pictorial type plaiting, that comes from the customer.
Really?
The
Okay.
flamingo, it was a customer who was into flamingos. The fox customer said, "Can you do a fox?" They saw the flamingo. They said, "Do the fox." The flamingo was actually fun. I'd actually ordered like 4 purple hides, and
Oh.
I got 4 pink, and it was just
Okay.
like, what am I going to do with 4 pink? I could use 1 or 2, but I'm like, what am I going to do with 4 pink? And I was looking for, I was trying to think of a theme to do a high
Right.
plat whip, and all of a sudden the pink hides. All of a sudden, I thought about these pink hides that I had, and thought about my friend Chris, and he's a bigger guy, and he's really he started going down to Key West, and he's got a thing with flamingos.
Okay.
So I was like, hey, we actually ended up contacting his wife saying, hey, you interested in, do you think Chris would be interested in a flamingo whip? And she was like, yes, don't tell
Oh,
him.
so it was a surprise
So he
also.
knew he ended up knowing he was going to get a whip because he wanted to, he kind of gave me dimensions, he's like, I want a 5-foot whip, I like a 9-inch handle. That's
Hmm.
all he knew.
Okay. Wow.
So I was like, the
And then what was
pink
his feedback?
flamingo. There you go. Oh, I got a picture of him opening. He's like, oh.
Yes, that kind of makes it all worth it. Oh, that's so
And
cool.
the fox was somebody had seen the flamingo whip and was like, can you do a fox?
Okay.
So
How many strands was
the
that?
fox,
Those two. Do you remember?
the flamingo was a 48 plat, and the fox was a 64 on the
Okay.
handle, and then
But
32 on
that's a
the
lot.
long.
Wow. And how many was the one for LA WhipCon that it was?
Last year,
Yeah, last year.
it was a 32 plat handle with a 24 plat thong.
Okay. Wow.
Where-
Oh, there she is. Thing of beauty. Just hanging up there. Just
I would show it, but you can't really see it. Just look on
right.
my page.
Yeah, go to the website. Everybody check that out. Hey, we have a question here. Actually, a couple of questions. Um, Justin is asking us, how did the freedom of the LA whip making competition influence your choice on what whip to make? Did you choose a certain type of whip because you thought it would be more likely to win? So it goes back to what you were talking about with a lot of options.
Yeah. Mainly, I chose stock whip because the handle, you can really get fancy.
Hmm.
You can get the strands really small. Because on the handle you don't have to really yank it down like you would have on a thong.
True.
And a bullwhip, like the flamingo or the fox, that transition between the 64 and the 32 or the 48 and the 24 is really tricky. And you really got to crank those strands down, but then you're cranking on something that is really thin.
Right. Yeah.
So,
You're breaking a strand in the middle of that would be a nightmare.
and I love making stock whips. So
Do what you're good at. Do what you like. If you, especially if you can put that much time into it.
yeah,
How long does it take
it
you to make? Uh, let's say the Fox one. How much time do you think?
I think it took me about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, something like that.
Basically full time. Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
easily over 100 hours.
Yeah. Once I get the strands prepped, it's actually prepping the strands is actually a little bit quicker than plaiting when you're doing that.
Right.
Versus the other way around, usually with like a standard, 16 or 12 plat whip, but you're just.
Do you use? Oh, sorry.
You're the higher plats. It really tests your skills with hide preparation and picking out your hide. You can cut through something and get away with it on a 12 plat that you cannot get away with on a high plat whip.
Right.
So it really, I love doing it because it really kind of focuses me on utilizing the hide and really seeing every single blemish, and then every whip after that, is like nothing.
Right.
You
do a 12 plat whip and just kind of do it in your sleep, I imagine.
Yeah, you do a 12 plat and you're just like, whatever, woo, done.
Exactly. Hey, Johnny just asked, hey, can Evan give the camera a spin and show the shop real quick? You don't have to if you got your scene. I know for mine, that part back there is not as organized as that part. So, but like, is this where the magic happens right here?
My computer dies if I unplug it, so that's about all I can do.
That's awesome.
Sorry.
Johnny has a really fun. I don't know if you've seen some of his videos and pictures. He's got this cool side-by-side double vise thing, kind of mobile.
I've got something similar down. I've got a little alley behind me. It's actually on the other side of the shelf. It's like this little alley, and I've got something like that similar that I prep my strands off of.
Okay, give you enough room to walk behind it.
Side by side there, but I got two vices side by side elsewhere.
Cool.
That way I can take a break, give my hands a break from plaiting and prep some strands or something. If I'm
sure
doing something to just break a strand, I could go do something else, and it's not in the way of where I'm plaiting or anything. So
yeah. So I'm thinking about just the level of the artistry and the level of skill it takes to do this. What would you say were some of the major jumps in your knowledge and skill level? I mean, you went from, hey, this leather working sort of thing is kind of fun, to doing a 48 plat whip. There seems like there's a big jump between the starter kit at Tandy and doing that. What are a few of those
whips?
Yeah.
Difference. Probably like the flamingo I was ready for that, but I still needed some fine tuning when I did that. It wasn't until I went to LA that I really got, and picked Peter's brain.
Okay. And so it's the talking to him.
Just when the first year he went, I heard he was going, I was like, I'm going. I'm like, I don't care. It's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper to fly to LA and pick his brain than it is to fly to Australia to pick his brain.
That's a good point. Oh my goodness.
And it's I had the design down, I just didn't have the fine tuning.
Okay.
Just really fine tuning your finish work. The beveling, the strand preparation, just like minor things. It's that makes or breaks a whip.
I mean, like you said, the beveling on one strand was what went from first to second, right? Along those same lines, Alyssum Iris asks us, do you, well, I guess you, because I can't answer this. Do you prefer stranding with jigs or by hand? And if you use any jigs, can you
Who
talk about them? Her
is
name
this?
is
Who I?
Alyssum
Oh,
Iris.
hey. I actually have the Why Not Bubbler, the resizer that she has, because I know she just
Oh
posted
yeah.
something, right? Um, and I actually have one of those. I used to use that more than I do now. I do not use the beveling portion of that. I do that by hand. But I do use the resizer. Um, but I also use the pegs that I got from Josh a couple years ago.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I started
The
using
3D
those
printed things.
more. Yeah, and they're great. Um, but the
Just
resizer I definitely do use on a regular basis. I mean, it's a great tool. I don't like the beveling section of that. It takes it all the way down to the edge. I don't like that. I like to leave a little bit on the side of the strand,
okay.
so it has to butt up against.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
it's something that I learned from Peter. See if I can do a picture. Um, and that beveler, when I tried to use it, the strands had a tendency of riding up the guide,
Ah,
so you weren't getting,
sure.
But if I was just cutting a square piece, just resizing it worked. But when I'm beveling,
Having graphics for our presentation. Look at this.
where's my camera? It's
Okay.
gonna be something like that
Ah,
instead of that. So
sure.
so you have another strand next to it. It butts up against it, and this is
I
also
see. I see.
very, very large. You know,
All right. So I've seen in some of the whip making books, they talk about instead of doing both on the top, some would do both
Hmm.
parallel, one on the bottom, one on the top. Do you have a preference for different strand counts on that?
I always do both on bottom on the overlay. I'll do top and bottom on the bellies because you don't see it. I don't like the look of the fray, especially if you're doing a color. Um, you
Okay.
the center of the hide, the outside of the hide is not necessarily the same color as the center of the hide or the back of the
Ah, yeah.
hide. So
I could see that.
it doesn't. You'll get like a three-tone look, and I don't really like the look of that. I like
It would
how it
probably
fits,
it
especially
would
when you're doing patterns.
right, yeah, it would highlight any
Mhm.
disparity as well when that trim.
So,
Very
but
good question. Yeah.
when I'm doing
Thank you.
bellies, I don't care what it looks like. It's but the overlay, I'm always doing the underside.
Okay. So that they and then the top edge is what butts together. That's the
Yeah,
right. Gotcha. Very cool. And you do this like just wrap the leather around your hand and just walk backwards with the lace
yeah.
and just
I got a little piece of rue I put on my finger and just hold it on one hand and just
that it's just hard to imagine doing something that's tiny like that by hand. Ah,
it's
practice
once
time.
you get used to it, it's a lot easier than it sounds. It's nerve wracking at first when you're learning how to do it, but once you do it a couple times, you're just like, this is not as hard as it sounds.
Okay.
You're literally
I take
just
your word
lock
for it.
your hands together so nothing moves except for the strand going.
Sure.
You're moving, your body's moving, but your hands do never move.
Okay. 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 Actually, Eddie has a question here. Eddie Vasquez, and he says, "How do you like the whip maker's cord?" Notice that you've made a few whips with it, so it's also narrower than regular
Yeah.
paracord, obviously, but nowhere near as narrow as like a 48 plat stock whip.
No, it's interesting. I like it better than the 275 cord. The 275 doesn't lay nicely.
Yeah,
In my opinion,
yeah,
it doesn't have that flat look that that I kind of like. But I also haven't played with it that much. I've made a couple whips out of it.
I find that it slides a little bit, so you have to be much more careful to keep all your strands tight as you're going. You can't kind of pull it and let it lock down and then move on to the next round there. I have to be more careful to keep tension myself. But I haven't done anything near the numbers that you have, obviously.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I made like 5, 6 whips out of it so far, and I like how it lays. I haven't quite figured it out yet because I haven't made too many. I haven't made enough to really figure it out.
Yeah, I've got one here that, I mean, I did a little fancy plating in mine. I'm proud of. It's nothing. It's embarrassing compared to what's behind you, but but yeah, it just has almost a glassy, smooth feel to it compared to some of the other ones. Just that they lay down so nice. But yeah, exactly.
It lays more like a leather whip.
Yeah.
The strands
exactly
more like leather than it does a paracord.
Right.
Paracord is really bulky and thick, so
sure,
it's figuring out to compensate for the lack of bulkiness if you're used to nylon.
Sure, you have to either do another layer or some sort of bolster or something. But
I kind of know the dimensions of kind of my leather whips, so I make the core and everything to basically fit that.
Okay.
So I know what kind of what diameter I would need it, and I'm basically making it just like a leather whip.
Okay. Do you have some sort of? Do you make the core and all out of leather, or do you still use all synthetic?
I just
on those.
I'm doing synthetic. Okay. It's all synthetic. It's not 100% vegan because there's leather scraps in this workshop.
Sure. But
if you're that concerned, my whips have been made in a facility that processes leather, so
I think people would know that if they bought something from you.
I like to eat peanuts, so
is that a common concern? It wasn't a topic I would have thought to talk about.
We got some vegans in the family, so it's better anti-animal eating animals and stuff. So I kind of understand the concept.
Sure. Well, yeah, you can be the black sheep. That's okay. When I bring my bullwhips out at Christmas time, people look at me strange too, even the family members. But works better on 4th of July, I suppose.
Yeah.
But anyways, so with the LA WhipCon this year, we were primarily focused on cracking with the function half of whips, right? With so many people doing so many amazing artistry things. Did you submit any cracking just to participate?
No.
Or no? Yeah, there were several.
I'm embarrassed. When I go out to LA, I don't even pick up a whip. I'm so embarrassed. I'm just like, these guys blow my mind in terms of what they can do.
Oh, I know.
The first year I went out there, I thought I was okay. I went out there, I was like, yeah, none of my cracks are even nearly as loud as their like misses.
Right.
I was so intimidated. I didn't pick up a whip, but I was there to, originally first time I was there to pick Peter's brain, so that's what I did.
Just follow him around, talk to him.
Pretty much.
No,
hey, Peter, I know you're gonna watch this at some point.
Probably so. I've messaged him to see if he could chat with me sometime in the near future here, and he's down for it.
Cool.
And maybe in a few days though, so that'd be fun. But yeah, so how, so I guess what that kind of naturally asks, how do you make a whip for somebody that wants to do that sort of thing? Do you just know that this construction has had good response? I talking to someone like Tori Fisher, he spends a lot of time learning how to crack whips as well as making whips, and he talks about how they kind of feed on each other.
Mm.
But yet, obviously, I've used some amazing whips as well, and you don't have to be a world champion whip cracker to make a world champion whip crackers whip.
No, you don't.
So, what informs you on those sort of on your design and on this whip is not coming along the way I want it to, that sort of thing?
Gut feel
Mm.
sometimes. Just knowing everything must taper. I just think it all depends on the person, and what they're
Mm.
looking for. If they're looking for something light, fast, is going to be different than something slow and flowy,
Okay.
or long and flowy, or it really, you try to figure out what somebody is looking, ultimately looking to do with it.
Sure.
So if it's target work or two-handed routines,
Hmm.
I like a white whip.
Right.
You know, I, I may be intimidated, but I do crack whips.
Sure.
I'm not as good. It's
And that's kind of what I'm asking is that so when you pick up a whip as a world class whip maker, what is it that you're feeling? Like, and some of those words that you've used, I think, are important for other aspiring whip makers to hear. Is that you have those sort of definitions in your head as to target work and light or flowy, or these are important things that apparently are tied to blueprints in your head. For example, I don't know if that's
uh,
putting words in your mouth, but
um
kind of sort of.
okay. Go over that again. I got
No. So what I'm saying is that how do I put this? How do you translate when a customer says, "I want a light and a fast target whip," into actually cutting strands? What is it in your head that says this equals that? Um, do you have predefined
I,
plans or
no. It's if it's something specific like that, I'm just slightly modifying kind of my
Mhm.
plans, like my dimensions. Um, so it's like if it's just a matter of making the core a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, a little bit fatter, a little bit thinner. It's
Okay.
you know,
So you have
it,
a few things that you know that you can modify.
sometimes it's just a matter of just splitting everything just a fraction of a millimeter thinner. 0.6 millimeters instead of 0.7 millimeters,
Wow.
or 0.8 millimeters. It's because after layer after layer after layer, that adds up.
Sure. No, that
Every
makes sense.
layer, you've got four layers actually, top and
Right? Oh
bottom.
yeah, that's
That
true.
0.1 of a millimeter is now 0.4 millimeter on a braided section.
Right.
Yeah.
Which can all adds up to a significant amount of
So yeah,
weight.
two bellies of that, there's almost a millimeter difference.
Okay. Okay. That
So
helps.
that can really change the dynamics of the whip.
Has anyone asked you to make a whip for a specific trick? Like, I need this to be my Hassett's Four Corners whip. Like, for example.
No, not specifically like that. Because I think that just ends up being, it's. I think some of the Australian whip crackers might know what they want in terms of that.
Sure. And that's kind of where I'm getting this from.
Very specific in their dimensions and weight and whatnot. But it's a lot of times it's just the 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 whip that they get, and there's like, this is it. This is,
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, and that helps.
the whips until they find that right one.
Exactly.
No two of my whips are exactly the same. Not even a set are exactly the same.
I mean, it's a natural material. It can't be.
Yeah, it's, you do your best to make it as act as you can, but like you said, it's a natural material. I'm the only human. I'm not a machine. You know, it. You can only do as good as you can. But there'll be very minor differences. Sure. But when it comes from one set or another set, I've made two sets. One's just a little bit heavier because the strands, like I said, didn't get split quite as thin, or as or whatever. One was thicker,
or maybe it feels a little denser. Mm-hmm. Maybe I don't know. Sometimes it feels like that's the case.
And the skin, there's a lot of different variables that you got to deal with especially with leather. Like nylon, it is what it is.
I heard an interview that this question's kind of coming from, and it might have been from WhipCast. So if anyone's listening remembers this, let me know. But there was a whip cracker who had a family whip, and they used it for one particular trick, and the whip broke. It was just an old whip, and they were going through buying many whips and giving them the same sort of specifications on that their old one had, and just using different whip crackers around the world until they found that one set that was not only the pair matched the way they wanted it to, but it was able to do that trick the way that they thought it should. And I don't remember, it was 12 or 14 different whips that they had to go through before they found that right set as this champion, or trying to be a champion whip cracker over in Australia. So I didn't know, as a whip maker of your caliber, how you address those sort of concerns, or it's just, I'll try my best to hit that and take it or leave it.
You can't guarantee anything like that, especially if you're trying to replicate something else, even if it's something that you made. I've had people ask, "Oh, I got this whip from you 5 years ago. Can you make?" I'm like, I can do my best, but it's not gonna be like a match set,
right?
It's not gonna be the same. I can make it as close as I can, but not gonna be the same.
Yeah, especially without having that other one in hand. I mean, even that makes it really difficult.
Yeah, exactly. But even if you do have it in your hand, you're not taking it apart.
That's true.
The part that you really need to focus on in terms of like a difference in functioning of a whip is the cores. Is the core in the belly, and how that was constructed. You can kind of guess by measuring the thong in different spots, and knowing that well, you're not going to be in an 8 plat if you're at the thickest part of the thong. If it's a 12 plat whip, obviously, you got to compensate, but you can't tell exactly where the braided portion of the belly ends. You can guess, probably within 6 inches or so.
But I mean, 6 inches. I mean, that's a significant amount of weight.
That's a huge amount of weight.
Yeah, I had to make. I made one whip for a guy, and he loved it, and he said he wants to learn how to juggle. So make me 2 more, so that they all 3 match. I'm like, I'll try my best.
Exactly.
So these were short bull whips. So he liked it, but yeah, it was kind of a nightmare. I have another question here from Elysium. It says, what are your thoughts on tension And I think I asked Johnny the same question. But do you make a roo whip that is braided tight to be broken in by the user, or do you make them ready to go? And
Leather
I guess
tight.
similar to paracord.
Leather tight.
You braid
As
leather
tight as you
tight.
can.
And paracord, do you do the opposite?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My first pair, I started with leather, and my first paracord whips that I made were like sticks.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I've got one over there.
I was used to yanking down on it, especially on the bellies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really just putting all my weight into it. So I did the same thing with the nylon. Came like
Probably tore up your hands too.
you know, it was like a
Oh,
you know it did crack, it didn't move, but it didn't have that flow. You know, and it takes me a while. It took me a while to figure out really the right kind of tension to get the nylon right.
mm-hmm.
But leather will break in and loosen over time. You know, if it's plaited too loose, the leather one, if it's plaited too loose, it'll actually get too
Right.
loose once it breaks.
It'll get looser and
You
looser.
know, it will continue to stretch and kind of get too
Right,
floppy.
right. Yeah, even with the paracord, obviously there's a range because it doesn't really stretch. I mean, there is some tiny bit, but obviously there's a range of preferences, and maybe people break in their whips. I don't know if there's a way to keep it broken in at a certain point, but with leather. But I know Adam likes his extremely loose, his nylon whips, and watching the videos and looking at some of them from both Nick and a couple other people, they pull theirs quite a bit tighter, and they like a really nice long transition where you have about 24 inches at the tightest natural fall of it. Versus Adam likes practically a stock whip feel to his bull whips. So, do you ever try to change that? I mean, when you do your nylon whips, or do you just kind of have your way?
I pretty much have my way. If I know someone's gonna use it more for targeting, I may tighten up that transition area on a bull whip or something.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I'd rather not mess with something that seems to work
Right. No,
for
I
me. You
get
know,
that.
it's then keep messing with it, and the more you overthink it, the worse it's gonna be.
And that's probably
It's a whip.
a lot of wisdom in that. Yeah.
Taper it. Everything must taper. As long as you think that, everything must taper.
Everything must taper.
You know?
Which is always a challenge with paracord.
Exactly.
Because you can't trim the taper.
You gotta make something taper that doesn't taper. So it's
staggered. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. Keith is commenting. It's got to be tight. He does a lot of target work, so that makes a lot of sense.
Especially in transition if you're doing target.
Right. Yeah, and on his video, I don't know if you've watched the interview that I did with him the other day, but he showed one that Torrance Fisher made for him, and he held it up, and it was just like the transition was really stiff first couple feet, and Keith does some amazing target work.
My first paracord whip was like twice as stiff as that throughout the entire
way.
You like literally take a 6-foot whip and just like hold it out straight.
You made a walking stick. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Well, this has really been awesome. What if someone is interested in getting an EF Whips original? How would they best go about contacting you and getting in line? Because I'm sure there's a long waiting list.
Email me at efwhips@kangaroowhips.com. I don't seem to get all my messages on Facebook all the time. You can try that, but I've noticed before that I've had messages and never got a notification. And like a week later, it was like, got a message from someone else, and then both popped up. So I don't want to say that's a good way, but
Okay.
be able to reach me.
KangarooWhips.com
I
probably have
will
all those
admit
links.
I am terrible at getting back to people, but I will get back
Fair
to
enough.
you.
Fair enough. You're a busy man. 48 strands don't braid
Nope.
themselves, right?
I wish they did.
That, right? Yeah. Whips would be cheaper if that was the case,
Oh yeah.
probably. But well, this has been awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the masses of 9 people watching?
No, but it's when they have the LA WhipCon again, back in LA, go.
I like it.
You don't be intimidated. I was so intimidated. I didn't pick up the whip the first year at all. I came back. I picked up a whip when I got home, and I was actually cracking better from just watching everyone
Awesome.
and being around everyone.
You
You
know,
pick up so
yeah.
much. Whether you're a whip maker, if you're a whip maker, come out. There's a lot of great, amazing whip makers there. You can pick their brain all day long. That's what we're there for. And whip crackers, they're there to just help everyone out. Everyone's just so friendly.
I mean, it's such a small community too that it really feels like everyone is really approachable. And thank you for your time. I mean, this is really awesome that I can talk to somebody with your skill level. So thank you very much. But if there's no other questions from the chat room, I want to thank everyone for joining, and I'll be posting more soon. Thank you, sir. Have a good day. Bye-bye.